If I could sum up week 11 in one word, it would be Plinko. What's Plinko? For those who used to remember, or I guess maybe they still do play this game on The Price is Right, where they drop the Plinko puck into the, I guess they call it a game board, and it bounces back and forth as it goes down, and then eventually it settles into one of the dollar amounts which you win. But at the last minute, it could bounce one way or the other, depending on whichever way the gambling gods or the football gods are directing that particular day. Well, that was week 11 in the NFL. What is up, everybody? It is time for another episode of The Morning After. Episode 8. Wow, we really are cranking them out here on TMA. It is the morning after week 11 in the NFL. It is 2 mornings after week 12 in college football, and we have a lot to get to. On today's show, I'm going to obviously break down everything we saw in both college football and the NFL. We're going to update my college football playoff predictions. We are going to update Super Bowl Island. What's Super Bowl Island, you say? I did this on my BetMGM show, which unfortunately got canceled this year. But I did it with Brandon Marshall. We had a blast every Sunday breaking down everything NFL related. But what I would do is I would basically just run through all of the teams that I thought could win the Super Bowl. We would do it in playoff bracket style. But I kind of tweaked it for social media. Now that we're not doing that show anymore, I'm just doing it on social media. And I'm basically just posting the teams that I think can win the Super Bowl. So we'll update Super Bowl Island as we get ready for another week in the NFL. The college football playoff predictions are just absolutely nuts. We'll update the Heisman. We'll update the college football coaching carousel. We'll do some rise and wine. Where I'll be honest, this one's gonna hit close to home. Because it's been something that I've been talking about on some of the national news shows this week, which has been really fun. Hopefully I'll get some more opportunities to do that. I was on ABC News last week talking about this, and I think the future of gambling for sure, the future of prop bets are definitely in question. And then we'll close the show with Morning Glory. I'll give you a pick for Monday Night Football. As the Cowboys are going to take on the Raiders here in Vegas. But first, let's start with the NFL. Week 11 reactions. Good week for underdogs, good week for unders. If you're betting underdogs, you went 8-6 this week. Unders 9-5. Weather was a big factor across a ton of games this week. We saw a lot of wind. We saw a lot of rain. We saw some of the cold weather start to take effect across the country, especially in the Midwest. And that, I think, had a big impact in the games. But if I could sum up week 11 in one word, it would be Plinko. What's Plinko? For those who used to remember, or I guess maybe they still do play this game on The Price is Right, where they drop the Plinko puck into the, I guess they call it a game board, and it bounces back and forth as it goes down, and then eventually it settles into one of the dollar amounts which you win. But, at the last minute, it could bounce one way or the other, depending on whichever way the gambling gods or the football gods are directing that particular day. Well, that was week 11 in the NFL. How about this crazy stat? 5 teams recorded the game-winning score on the final play of the game. Panthers, Bears, Broncos, Texans, Dolphins. That is tied with week 10 in 2023 and week 4 in 2018 for the most in a single day in NFL history. Again, I'll repeat that for those in the back. 5 teams recorded the game-winning play or the game-winning score on the final play of the game. And let's take it one step further just to show you how wild and wacky and, let's be honest, coin flippy this week was in the NFL. There have been 7 teams, and I guess we still have one game pending on Monday night, but up until Monday night, 7 teams won after trailing in the fourth quarter. The Ravens, the Bills, the Panthers, the Broncos, the Bears, the Packers, the Dolphins. That is the most in a week since 2022. So what's my point with all of this? Well, I think we've reached a point in the NFL, especially this season. It seems like this season things are a little bit strange. And it does seem like this season there really is no rhyme or reason to who's winning these games. I'll be honest. When I watch these games every Sunday, and I spend hours watching these games every Sunday, I watch every single snap I possibly could. I have quad boxes up on my screens. I have every game on in the NFL. I have as many games on possibly in college football, but we're focusing on the NFL right now. When I watch these games every week, it just seems like there is no real rhyme or reason to why the results take place. I firmly believe every week that the best teams are not necessarily winning. And you could illustrate that based off of one stat, which I basically just cooked up as I was looking through some of the standings before the show today. So if you look at the NFL standings right now, Bo Nix, Drake May, and Daniel Jones, right? The Broncos, the Patriots, the Colts are combined 26-6. But in reality, those quarterbacks, Nix, May, Jones, 26-6. Whereas Mahomes, and Lamar Jackson, a combined 17-13. It's really, truly remarkable how lopsided the NFL is this year from a balance of power perspective. The teams that we are used to seeing win at an alarmingly high rate, especially in the AFC, right? We're specifically focusing on the AFC here. The Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens. These are the last three MVPs in the NFL. These are the teams that are perennially in the AFC Championship game with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, a combined 17-13 through 11 weeks. Whereas Bo Nix, Drake May, Daniel Jones, Broncos, Patriots, Colts, a combined 26-6. Now, the NFC, I think, is a little bit more predictable this year, where you do have teams that we expected, Eagles, Rams at the top, but Bears, Bucks, Seahawks, Panthers, like these are teams that are above 500 in the NFC that I don't think we expected to be there. So it is absolutely a year of parity in the NFL, and no greater point than what we're seeing in the AFC. I mean, it really is remarkable. Just the randomness, I think, in these results. So let's get to the individual results and let's go through and kind of upgrade and downgrade these teams accordingly. We'll start with Thursday night. Patriots over the Jets. Not really much to get to there. I thought the Patriots were the better team. The Jets came out with a decent script, got an early score, but for the most part after that, New England controlled the game. I thought they deserved to win. Did they deserve to cover? If you bet New England early, you covered. If you bet the Jets late, you might have gotten the 13.5. But for the most part, it was New England in the second half really controlling that game. The early game, I didn't upgrade. By the way, I didn't upgrade the Patriots or downgrade the Jets because they didn't really cover the closing spread. And I don't know. I think I'm kind of reached my saturation point on downgrading the Jets and upgrading the Patriots. I do think, when you start to see situations where teams are, not quite covering the spread, they're just getting barely to the edge of the number. That's kind of where, you kind of think, all right, maybe we've upgraded this team too much, and we've definitely upgraded New England a lot since the start of the year. Miami over Washington, didn't upgrade either team or downgrade either team for that performance. Kind of a balanced box score. Really, the difference was the 2 turnovers. Neither team could do anything in the red zone. Washington 0 for 3 in the red zone. Miami 1 for 5. So I thought both teams were pretty sloppy. And it really was the turnover late, especially for Mariota, that cost the Commanders the game. And hey, the Dolphins keep fighting for Mike McDaniel. Remember, we thought he was going to be the first coach fired? Yeah, we were wrong about that. I did upgrade Carolina for their win over Atlanta. They won yards per play, but lost success rate. I don't know what to make of the Falcons right now. I was on Atlanta in the game. I thought they had a chance to cover. They were up 5 late. couldn't stop Bryce Young from driving down the field. I don't know what it is about the Falcons, but Bryce Young just always seems to play his best games in his career against Atlanta. Even though he took 5 sacks in the game and they went 2 for 6 in the red zone, they still managed to pull out an outright win as an underdog on the road. So Carolina keeps winning games. They're a playoff team right now. Potentially. They're not in the playoffs if they started today, but they certainly have an opportunity to make the playoffs based off of their record. I upgraded Buffalo for their win over Tampa. Dominated the box score. Back and forth game, but they definitely deserve to win it. Almost 8 yards per play. Didn't win the turnover battle. Really fun game in the fourth quarter for sure. We saw both teams in the second half take leads, but it was Buffalo's offense. And Tampa Bay had a couple opportunities to go for it on fourth down. I thought Todd Bowles was a little conservative, and they weren't great in the red zone. So Tampa, Baker looked healthy. He was running it a lot more, but Tampa, after their fast start, has really fallen off the table pretty quick here with back-to-back losses against Buffalo and New England in the last 2 weeks. So the AFC East really putting a hurting on the Bucs' postseason chances. The Texans pulled out a road win over the Titans. Not very impressive. Didn't upgrade or downgrade either team. Davis Mills wasn't great, but Houston did a slight win in the box score. And they kept their playoff hopes alive. Tennessee continues to be a dumpster fire, one of the worst teams in the NFL. Got to give credit to the Bears. You want to talk about resourcefulness and just being able to pull out games. I mean, the Bears right now are first place in the NFC North. How about that? Could have never expected that coming into the year. I had Chicago missing the postseason, under 8.5 wins. Looks like I'm going to lose both of those bets. But they didn't win the box score. They were +2 in the turnover margin. That's why they won the game. J.J. McCarthy's a disaster, guys. He looked really bad. I think that Minnesota quarterback situation, when you see what Sam Darnold was able to do last year, and now you look at J.J. McCarthy, who they were very high on, and it's just been a complete disaster, I think, for Minnesota at the quarterback position. Packers pulled out a win over the Giants. Not a very sexy win. They lost Josh Jacobs. We'll see what that injury looks like. That's a big injury for them. He's going to get more tests on his knee next week. But you credit Jordan Love, made a couple of nice throws late, especially the touchdown to Watson. Not a huge box score win. The Jordan Love got sacked 5 times. He had to leave the game at one point with an injury. They did not perform well in the red zone, so I'm not upgrading Green Bay. But, hey, you go on the road, you win a football game in the NFL. I'm not going to apologize for it anymore, especially with all the craziness we're seeing. You got to upgrade Pittsburgh for their performance over the Bengals. Dominated the box score there, won by 20+. I think we're kind of seeing the end of the Joe Flacco experience. It's been fun with Flacco, but I think the Bengals, they need Joe Burrow back in a bad way. I know they got some good news on him this week, so we'll see when Burrow comes back. It looks like it's going to be at least another week or two of Flacco for Cincinnati, but man, that defense continues to struggle. They went 0 for 2 in the red zone. They turned it over twice, and Cincinnati under 10 wins. Going to be an early winner for the Bengals this year. Does not look like Cincy is going to be able to pick themselves off the map. How about Jacksonville? That was a really impressive win for Jacksonville. I mean, the Chargers were sleepwalking in South Florida, or I guess in North Florida for that game. They gained just 3 yards per play. Biggest box score win of the day. Plus 21% net success rate for Jacksonville. They played really clean football. Only 1 penalty, 5 for 6 in the red zone. Really good game across the board. The Jags I'm not going to say they're going to make the playoffs, but they're in the mix at 6-4. I do think Liam Cohen's done a nice job, sneaky good job with that team. And we'll see. We'll see what Jacksonville's schedule is down the stretch. I think they have to play the Texans. Actually, no, they might have faced the Texans twice. Yeah, they faced Texans twice already. They get to play the Colts twice and the Titans twice. Jets, Broncos, Cardinals. Yeah, I'll be honest. The Jags, they're still alive for the division. I mean, they're 2 games back at Indy, and they get 2 games against the Colts down the stretch. The first one will be in a couple of weeks. So, not the worst spot to be in for Jacksonville. That'll be an interesting game in a couple of weeks when the Jags play the Colts. I'll keep my eye on that one. The only Fugazi result I have of the day on Sunday was the Rams. They did not, based on the box score, deserve to beat the Seahawks, but they did get the win. They were outgained. lost success rate. The reason they won the game is because they were a +3 turnover margin. Sam Darnold was awful. I guess maybe you credit the Rams defense, you credit their secondary, but Darnold was seeing ghosts out there. Threw 4 picks. They didn't do a good job in the red zone. They kicked a ton of field goals. If they would have converted one of those field goals into touchdowns, they would have won the game. But I think the Seahawks, listen, guys, there was a reason why a lot of people thought the Geno Smith to Sam Darnold move was a downgrade. And Darnold has really impressed a lot of people so far, me included. He was an MVP candidate heading into the game, but that was an ugly performance today. And if they just play that game out 100 times, Seattle probably wins more often than they lose because based on the box score, they certainly deserve to win. But I don't know if you can trust Darnold in a close game. I think that's the one thing I learned yesterday is you just cannot trust Sam Darnold as we get closer to December. And we saw this last year with Minnesota. He was great in the regular season, and then he turned into an absolute pumpkin in the postseason against an NFC West team. So I feel like against this Rams team, I feel like we kind of know the answer to the test with Darnold. It's going to look okay, and then when push comes to shove, it's going to fall apart like a poorly constructed cake just crumbling to mush right in front of our eyes. The Niners keep winning games. Listen, you want to talk about a team that maybe can get healthy and make a run. Brock Purdy came back. The Niners got outgained by Arizona, but 54% success rate. They were good in the red zone. They didn't turn it over. They scored a bunch of points, and Arizona's a team that I thought had at least a puncher's chance in this game, especially defensively, but the Niners made them look small. So you credit San Francisco. Again, that's a team that down the stretch, if they can figure out a way to get healthy, if they can figure out a way to get a little bit of momentum, is there a quarterback or a offensive play caller you want to see right now that's Purdy and Shanahan? I certainly don't. And their schedule down the stretch, guys, Panthers, Browns, Titans, Colts, Bears, and then they play the Seahawks the last week of the year. I mean, there is a legit chance San Francisco runs the table and goes 12-5. I mean, that would be just based on the injuries they were dealing with early in the year. That would be a remarkable season for San Francisco. They're going to be favored in every game down the stretch except for the game at Indy. And even in that game, depending on how the Colts do over the next few weeks, that could be a close line. They're absolutely going to be favored against Carolina, against Cleveland, against Tennessee, against Chicago at home, and then against the Seahawks at home. The Niners are a very dangerous team, guys. Brock Purdy hasn't played a lot of football this year, but if he's playing at his peak, I'll be honest, San Francisco in the postseason, very, very dangerous team, even without their heart and soul Fred Warner. Keep an eye on the Niners down the stretch. In fact, that would be an interesting bet right now. What are the Niners? Because they split against the Rams, so there's a chance. What's their division record? The Rams are going to be undefeated in the division. No, the Rams are going to have the edge in the division most likely. Actually, Niners are 4-1 in the division, guys. I'll be honest. I think that might be an interesting wager. I don't know if they can outduel the Rams down the stretch because the Rams. Let's see what the Rams schedule is. Actually, that's the more interesting part. Who do the Rams play down the stretch? Rams play the Bucs. Oh, huge game for the Rams next week against the Bucs. Panthers, Cardinals, Lions, at Seahawks, at Falcons, Cardinals. So you get the Cardinals twice. You would think they're going to win both of those games. They need to win both of those games because if they lose a second game in the division and the Niners finish 5-1 in the division, that means the Niners would have the tiebreaker in the NFC West, which is absolutely huge. And right now, you can get the Niners at 7-1 to win the NFC West. I mean, listen, it's 7-1 for a reason. Do I expect to win that bet? No. But I wouldn't mind sitting on that. If the Rams, I mean, listen, the Rams did not look dominant today. If all of a sudden the Rams lose to Tampa next week and then they split those two Arizona games, or maybe they lose at Seattle on Thursday night, which is very possible on a short week, I think I might be making a San Francisco 7-1 bet to win the NFC West. I think that's a bet that I'm willing to make. Don't get me wrong, the Rams have been the best team in that division so far this year, but The Niners look like this is the buy low spot right now, based on how they played and who's back for them. And maybe we're kind of seeing the shadow on the wall for the Rams, right? Anytime you win but don't cover, it's kind of a canary in the coal mine that maybe you're just slightly overpriced. So maybe that's where LA is right now compared to the Niners. Keep an eye on that. Niners 7-1 to win the NFC West. Bookmark that price now and see where it is come, week before Christmas. That might be an interesting wager to make. The Ravens continue to march forward. Baltimore got back to 500. How about that? I think the Ravens were right. They were 1-5. And now they've won 4 straight. They're back to 500. They didn't dominate the Browns by any stretch, but they won despite a really bad game from Lamar Jackson with 3 turnovers and 5 sacks and 1 for 4 in the red zone. And they were still able to pull that game out. Again, Baltimore still has everything in front of them. They played the Jets, the Bengals, the Steelers, the Bengals, then the Patriots, the Packers, and then the Steelers to close the year. And right now they are a game back of Pittsburgh in the AFC North. And the Steelers have an Aaron Rodgers injury to deal with. So I would absolutely imagine that Baltimore, who is a heavy favorite at minus 325 to win the AFC North, not only are they going to win the AFC North, but I think they've got a shot to go over their win total. I think I got 11.5 with them, which means they need to go 12-5, which means they need to run the table. Actually, I might be wrong on that. I might have gotten 10.5 with the Ravens. Let me look. Nope, 11.5. Yeah, it's going to be tough for them to go over their win total and finish 12-5. But they can absolutely finish 11-6 and still win the AFC North and still be a very dangerous team come January. So Baltimore right now, even though they're a game back at Pittsburgh, heavy favorites to win their division. Craziest, I don't want to say craziest game of the day. It really wasn't that crazy of a game. It was actually kind of a boring game and a very sloppy game, was the Broncos beating the Chiefs. But you give Denver credit, right? A slight win in the box score, +1 turnover margin, 20 combined penalties in the game. It was a really sloppy game on both sides. 5 sacks. The teams combined 2 for 9 in the red zone. Just, again, not a sexy game in Denver, which is a really tough place to play. But you give the Broncos credit. They won. They're now 9-2 on the year. The Denver Broncos are just a runaway freight train in the AFC West. They are a $3 favorite to win the division right now. The Chiefs are sitting at 5-1. I mean, I want to fade Denver so bad because of how they're winning. Wins matter in the NFL. I mean, I've been very stubborn with my Chiefs opinion this year that I think they're the best team, and I think come playoff time, it's not going to matter what the record is and what this is and what that is. But at some point, you've got to respect teams like Denver and teams like Indy for winning games. The Chiefs are 5-5 this year. Now, to be fair, down the stretch, they play the Colts, the Cowboys, the Texans, the Chargers, the Titans, then the Broncos again, and then the Raiders. So they're going to be favored in likely every game this year down the stretch. Maybe they won't be a favorite against Denver based on where the Broncos record is, but let's be honest. They were a 4-point road favorite today. You don't think they're going to be a home favorite in a few weeks? I still have Kansas City, even despite today. I still have them rated as the second best team in the NFL. Behind the Rams, tied with the Eagles and the Bills as the second highest rating in my power ratings. Now, are my power ratings gospel? Of course not. They're just my power ratings. But I still think the Chiefs, despite the fact that they're 500, are still going to be priced like filet mignon. Maybe it'll be like a New York strip now instead of filet mignon, but they're certainly not going to be priced like chuck steak. They're definitely not going to be priced like, for example, I still have, if the Chiefs played the Broncos on a neutral today, I still have Kansas City as a 3-point favorite. So I'm not going crazy with the result today. It was not a decisive Broncos win. Am I going to upgrade the Broncos for an underdog win over the defending AFC champs? Yes. I'm going to upgrade them a point. I'm going to downgrade Kansas City a point. But the Chiefs were a 4-point road favorite, which means on a neutral they were probably 5.5 points better. So even if you upgrade one, downgrade one, you still got Kansas City as probably right around a field goal favorite. So we need to reframe the discussion that even though Denver won the game today, Kansas City is still going to be priced ahead and likely one of the highest rated teams in the AFC. I have them right now tied with Buffalo, 1 point ahead of Baltimore for the highest rated team in the AFC. If Kansas City and Denver played a rematch tomorrow on a neutral field, it would be the Chiefs -3. And I'm not changing that opinion. I just because Denver, and I'm giving them credit for winning. Don't get me wrong. Denver deserves all the flowers. They're 9-2. I think they've won 8 straight games. I think in January I'm still taking the Chiefs, especially if I'm getting a discount because Kansas City's on the road, or Denver, because of their record is getting a lot of respect in the market. The game we just saw Sunday night, kind of a snoozer to be honest. I actually fell asleep during multiple points of the game. So I didn't catch the whole thing, but not really much to get to in the box score. The Lions did outgain the Eagles, but Philly just sucked the life out of Jared Goff. And Dan Campbell I think the Lions went 0 for 5 on fourth downs. I think that's the number I saw. It was one of the worst fourth down conversion attempt days in the history of the NFL. But you give the Eagles credit for winning. I've got them as the second highest rated team in the NFC behind the Rams. And listen, you don't love the offense. Obviously, they only went 1 for 3 in the red zone and committed 9 penalties, and it was a 38% success rate with a sub 4 yards per play. It was not a sexy game at all for Philly, but you got to give them credit for winning these games. I think the NFL, again, based on what I told you with the Plinko nature of these games, there is no rhyme or reason for who's winning. You just have to pray you're on the right side of the margin. And it's making gambling really hard. I have not had a good year betting on these games. I have not had a good year picking sides. One of the worst years I've ever had picking sides. I'm like 5 or 6 games under 500 in all the contests. I can't pick a side to save my life this year. It is complete Plinko. And I'm usually pretty decent at kind of, detecting some of those sharper spots, but I am terrible this year, which means I'm backing a lot of favorites, which I don't normally do, but the favorites have been covering. And then when I tend to back the favorites, it's like what happens in the Packers game or the Ravens game where they'll win and not cover. I think it's just a really tough year to bet sides in the NFL. Again, I gave you that stat off the top. I'll give it to you again. Bo Nix, Drake May, Daniel Jones are a combined 26-6. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, their teams are a combined 17-13. Very strange year in the NFL. Drake May is your MVP favorite after 11 weeks. Nobody expected that. Actually, to be fair, Stafford is technically the favorite, just ahead of Drake May. I guess maybe some people might have expected that, but based off of his preseason when he didn't play because of the back injury, I really don't think anyone expected Stafford to be an MVP favorite. Nobody expected Matthew Stafford and Drake May to be the MVP favorites after 11 weeks of the NFL year. Patrick Mahomes right now 15-1, Jalen Hurts 25-1, Lamar Jackson 40-1. I mean, these are the guys that we expected to be the MVP favorites, and they are very far down on the list. But right now, if I had to pick the MVP today, I would absolutely pick Matthew Stafford, even though he did not have a great game against the Seahawks. You have to give the Rams credit for winning, and right now, the Rams are the number 1 team in my power ratings as we head to week 12 in the NFL. All right, let's move on to some college football. The college football playoff's been absolutely nuts. The college football playoff predictions segment, I feel like when I do this every week, I have no idea what we're going to get. It's like life is like a box of chocolates. I can tell you that I feel really solid about the top 4 teams. I think Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, Georgia. Obviously, you have to drop Bama for their bad performance. I still think Bama's got a pretty decent shot to win the national championship. I really think that might be a good buy low because Ty Simpson, they're still almost winning games despite the fact that Ty Simpson looks terrible. And I don't think he looks terrible. I just think he's going through a bit of a lull right now where he's not playing his best football. He's a little bit inaccurate. He's fighting his mechanics a little bit. And that was a tough loss for them. You got to give credit to Oklahoma, though, went into Tuscaloosa and got a huge win. So I have a pretty solid top 4 right now. Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, Georgia. I think, right, I said a few weeks ago that Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, Bama. I'll take those 4 teams. You take everyone else. And I feel like I've got the national champion in my corner. I still feel that way. I'll still take those 4 teams. And you can have everyone else. And I still feel like I've got the natty in my corner. A&M, I mean, you want to talk about one of the craziest results ever. Down 30-3 in the second half. You shut out South Carolina. You win the game 31-30. I don't trust A&M, though, as far as I can throw them. In fact, if it's A&M Bama in the SEC championship game, oh boy, will I be betting Bama really hard in that game. Ole Miss, Oregon, Texas Tech, Oklahoma, solidly in the field right now. Texas Tech looks like a legit team in the Big 12, guys. They are blowing teams out on a weekly basis, covering numbers at a really high rate. Do I think they can win a national championship? No. But can they win a playoff game or two and get to a Final Four and maybe scare an SEC team? Yeah, I think they can. I think Morton is an absolute stud at quarterback, and they've got a legit defense. They have an absolute legit defense that can keep them in a lot of games. Do not sleep on Texas Tech. I do not think they're good enough to win a national championship this year, but they are good enough to get to the Final Four, kind of like Notre Dame or Penn State last year, where they can use their defense and use their grittiness to kind of sneak into a Final Four. But Texas Tech, man, they paid big money for that roster, and it's paying off in a big way. I'll be really fascinated to see where the committee puts Bama and Notre Dame in the rankings next week. Obviously, you have to put Oklahoma ahead of Alabama based off of they just beat them. But I think what it'll be is, so I tweaked my format. So my college football playoff ratings, the top 10, this is how I think the top 10 is actually going to look. I think it's going to be Ohio State at 1, Indiana at 2, A&M 3, Georgia 4, Ole Miss 5, Oregon 6, Texas Tech 7, Oklahoma 8, Notre Dame 9, Bama 10. And then I put in my 2, ranked teams that are not in order, but these are the teams that are going to make the college football playoff field, Georgia Tech in the ACC. And James Madison I have in as my group of 5. USF lost to Navy. The American Athletic Conference is a disaster right now. The ACC is a disaster right now. I think both of those conferences are fortunate to get one team in, especially really actually the group of 5, JMU fortunate to kind of sneak in, but the ACC just fortunate to get one in the field. I right now, listen, I don't know who's going to make it in the G. I guess it would be technically the G6, but it'd be fun to see JMU get in. I think if they win out and they finish 11-1, and the rest of the American Conference finishes with 2 losses, I think you give it to JMU. Why not? It's not like the American Conference had a great year. But right now, you can get JMU at plus 170 to make the college football playoff. I feel like that's a pretty decent bet. I feel like it's kind of a coin flip right now in that American Conference, who's going to come out of it. And I don't think it's necessarily going to be a team that's ahead of JMU in the rankings. So JMU, who's got a pretty easy road in the Sunbelt, guys. I mean, let's be honest. They play Washington State at home this week, then they go to Coastal. And then they have to, win the Sunbelt championship, and they've run through the Sunbelt this year. They're 7-0 in the league. So I think JMU at plus 170 to make the college football playoff. I think that's a bet I would make. The other bet I'd make in the futures market right now, it's Bama to win the SEC at plus 275. As long as they beat Auburn, they're probably going to make the SEC championship game. There's a weird chaos scenario where if there's a ton of upsets in the other games because of strength of record, Bama would lose the tiebreaker, but it's like 5 different upsets have to take place over the last 2 weeks for that to happen. As long as Bama beats Auburn, I feel comfortable that they're going to be in the SEC championship game, and I'll be honest, they might even be favored against Texas A&M. It's not going to be a big line, that's for sure. A&M is not going to be getting a ton of respect in the market for how they played over the last couple weeks, and I think Bama is still Bama. They're going to get a lot of love, and plus 275 for Bama to win the SEC. That is a futures bet I would also be making right now. I would also consider buying low. I think I saw 15-1 on Bama to win the CFP. I would absolutely consider that as well. Guys, the college football playoff this year is wide open. Ohio State is a legit number 1. Indiana, A&M are right there at 2-3. But those teams, especially Ohio State, has not been tested this year. Indiana, they have been tested this year, but I don't think they're a dominant team by any stretch of the imagination. And obviously A&M almost lost to South Carolina the other day. So all of these teams have holes, and I think the CFP race is wide open this year. Anyone, I think, in the top 10 has a legit chance to win. And I can make a case for anyone on any given Saturday to win these games. Kind of like the NFL. It's Plinko right now. There is not a dominant team in college football. I think Ohio State is the best team, but I don't know if they're as good as last year. I think they've got a chance to be. We'll see how they handle the mental test of Michigan in a couple weeks. I think Ohio State has a chance to be as good as last year. We'll see how they handle some of these high pressurized scenarios. They have not been tested this year. Go look at Ohio State's schedule. They haven't been pushed. And if they do get pushed, I'll be interested to see how they respond. But right now, they're the best team, but I don't think they're a dominant team. I think the college football playoff race is wide open, and I think you could do worse than picking off some of these mid-tier, teams in the 6 to 15 range in the rankings that maybe you think can make a run. I think Bama's one of them. I think I would consider Bama at around 15-1, buying low off their loss to win the college football playoff. The Heisman race is, to me, a two-horse race. I think it'll be either Mendoza or Sayin. I don't understand the odds. I don't. You want to say Mendoza because they've played a tougher schedule, deserves to be the favorite. Right now, Julian Sayin is 2-1, and Fernando Mendoza is even odds. The reason that doesn't make sense to me is because the Heisman Trophy voting doesn't conclude until the Monday after championship weekend. That means whatever happens in the Big Ten championship game is going to factor into the Heisman race. Ohio State is going to be favored by at least a field goal over Indiana in the Big Ten championship game, unless they lose to Michigan. But even if they lose to Michigan, I still think Ohio State will be favored in the Big Ten championship game. Actually, I take that back. If Ohio State loses to Michigan, it'll be Michigan playing in the Big Ten championship game. I want to correct myself there. Okay. Ohio State has to beat Michigan. And then these odds don't make sense. Right now, I think what the odds are telling you is there's still a chance, a small chance, that Michigan beats Ohio State and Julian Sayin does not make it to the Big Ten championship game. And then, of course, Mendoza would win the Heisman if they go undefeated. But you have to really ask yourself this question. Do we really think Ohio State's losing to Michigan again this year? Michigan almost lost to Northwestern the other day. Michigan can't complete a forward pass. I don't get me wrong. I love Bryce Underwood. I think this Michigan story is intriguing. They have a legit chance to make the college football playoff if they can beat Ohio State. I don't think it's happening this year. I think last year was the magic was used up. I would bet Julian Sayin at 2-1 to win the Heisman. I would. I would absolutely bet him at 2-1 to win the Heisman. I think we are overcooking the grits with Mendoza. He's had a really nice year. He deserves to be the favorite, but I think he's a little bit too high of a favorite. I think it should be like plus 150, plus 175. Like, it really should be a little bit closer. The reason why I don't think you could give it to Marcel Reed, actually, to be fair, if A&M goes 13-0, maybe you have to give it to Marcel Reed. You know how impressive that is to go undefeated in the SEC? The problem is they're going to be dogs in the SEC championship game. They are. To either Georgia or Bama. Like, they're going to be dogs in that game. They're probably going to lose that game. And that's why I think you're seeing him being shaded the way that he is. And you're guaranteed to have Ohio State plays Indiana in the Big Ten championship, which, again, I think that's what it's going to be. You're guaranteed to have an undefeated Big Ten champion. And I think that quarterback, even though going undefeated in the SEC is such an incredible feat, that's why I was giving love to Ty Simpson all year, because I thought he was playing it at the best level. You know, Bama going undefeated in the SEC is just such a difficult thing to do. But in reality, it's the Big Ten this year, guys. It's going to be either Mendoza or Sayin. I would take a little nibble on Julian Sayin 2-1. I think Ohio State is going to beat Michigan. I think they're going to be favored by a field goal plus in the Big Ten championship game. I think they're going to beat Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. And I think Julian Sayin is going to be your Heisman Trophy candidate this year. Your Heisman Trophy winner this year. So I would take, not a huge bet, but if you had to make a Heisman bet today, and now that my pick, Simpson, is out, I might put a little nugget on Julian Sayin 2-1 to win the Heisman Trophy. All right, college football coaching carousel. Here's what I'm going to do this week. So last week, if you recall, and this was one of my more watched clips of the week, I came out and I said Eli Drinkwitz is going to be the next head coach of Penn State. Got a lot of pushback for that. Woo, boy. People did not like that take. I got called an idiot. I got called all kinds of mean things. Guys, it's going to happen. I think you just have to face the reality that, especially after the Elko news that he's going to re-sign at Texas A&M, I just think he's the best choice for Penn State. Not only is he, I think, the highest profile coach right now that's probably going to be looking for a job, but also the timing works out because Missouri is likely going to lose to Oklahoma this week. They're a 10-point dog on the road, and that'll be it for Missouri to make the college football playoff. It'll be their fourth loss. They're probably not going to make it anyways, but once you lose that fourth game, you're really out, and that's when I think the narrative will shift. But the other big reason why I think Drinkwitz makes a ton of sense for Penn State, he convinced Matt Zollers, who is the number one quarterback recruit in the state of Pennsylvania, to go to Missouri. If you can recruit in Pennsylvania like that, I think Penn State needs you. He also convinced a ton of high-level defensive transfers, including Damon Wilson at Georgia. He convinced one of the best defensive players at Georgia to not play for Kirby Smart and go play for him at Missouri. So he has the ability to recruit at a very high level. And I do think there is some alignment with him and Penn State. And based on the source, the text message I received a couple weeks ago, it still seems that way. I'm going to go through all the high profile openings and give you who Kalshi thinks is the favorite to be the next head coach, right? The prediction markets have been really fun to track for this kind of stuff. They're right more than they're wrong. They're not wrong 100%. They're not right 100% of the time, but they're right more than they're wrong. And a couple of them are pretty definitive on who they think the next coach will be. Right now, Eli Drinkwitz is the favorite to be the next Penn State head coach. It's not definitive. It's about 40% right now. You've got Brent Key as the second favorite, but right now it is looking like Eli Drinkwitz is going to be the next head coach at Penn State. Speaking of Penn State head coaches, James Franklin right now is a 90% favorite to be the next head coach at Virginia Tech. This is important, guys, because Virginia Tech in the DMV, right, the DC Metro, Maryland, Virginia area, is a recruiting hotbed for Penn State. That has always been an area that Penn State has done very well in recruiting-wise. Well, James Franklin's a really good recruiter, and Virginia Tech has really never challenged Penn State on the recruiting trail. Well, now they might. If James Franklin is now going to be the next head coach in Blacksburg, that is going to be an important thing to watch for Penn State fans, for sure, and anything recruiting-wise in the DMV, because he is going to make his presence felt. LSU and Florida both have Lane Kiffin as the favorite. Now, the odds are different at both. LSU has Lane at about 30%. Again, LSU, I think, is kind of a coin flip right now. I really don't know who the next LSU head coach is going to be. They've got Lane Kiffin as the favorite at 30%, John Sumrall at 17%. You've got a bunch of other coaches, including Joe Brady, Drinkwitz, Saban, Kelvin Shepard, the defensive coordinator at the Lions. Like the market doesn't really know who the LSU head coach is going to be. Florida, though, 62%. Kalshi right now has it at Lane Kiffin. So pretty solid, favorite for Lane. The next highest favorite is Jed Fish at 12%. So right now, based off of the prediction markets, it looks like Lane's going to Florida. And Ole Miss needed every ounce of that game to get past the Gators and keep their playoff hopes moving along on Saturday night. Auburn, it looks like John Sumrall, more than a coin flip's chance. 54% Auburn is looking at John Sumrall, current head coach of Tulane. Of course, Tulane still has a chance, outside chance to make the college football playoff, but not looking great for them. So I would imagine John Sumrall, it could be a quick exit for him from Tulane. If the Green Wave, they play Temple and Charlotte over the next 2 weeks, but they need some help to get into the American Conference Championship game. And even if they get into that game, with 2 losses, I just don't see them making the college football playoff. And in the final SEC opening, Arkansas, Alex Golish, not a very strong favorite. In fact, of all of the programs I looked at that are listed on Kalshi right now, this is the lowest of all the favorites, 21%. John Golish to Arkansas. Ryan Silverfield, Memphis head coach, is right behind him at 15%. So kind of a coin flip right now between those two guys. Sumrall looks like more of a solid choice to go to Auburn. Florida, Lane. LSU, Lane. Penn State, Drinkwitz. And James Franklin, most likely, highly likely, to be the next head coach at Virginia Tech. So the college football coaching carousel, we're up to almost $200 million in buyouts. The next episode of Ballers and Billions coming to a college program near you sometime in the next week or so. I think we will start to see the ink dry on some of these contracts as the college football coaching carousel, a very fascinating study this year. All right, let's close up the show by doing some Rise and Wine and some Morning Glory. Rise and Wine this week. So I had a very interesting week. Went on ABC News this week and talked to Kira Phillips about the continuous gambling scandals that are taking place across the country. So CNN asked me to go on the Anderson Cooper show. I shit you not. That actually happened on Friday. Unfortunately, I got bumped because of other breaking news that took place. The Epstein files, I don't want to get into it. A whole mess of stuff took place on Friday in between the time they booked me and when the show was taking place. So unfortunately, they bumped me because it was, sports gambling just is not as sexy of a topic as the Epstein files are. But I do think at some point, based off of the communications that I had with the producers, that they're going to want to have this conversation at some point. It looks like I'm at the top of their list of gambling experts to bring on the show, and I think I'm going to probably do some more ABC segments at some point because I don't think this story is going away, guys. This is now the next wave of gambling chatter in this country, right? The first wave was very hot and heavy. Everybody was betting. There were commercials everywhere. There was money flowing, marketing, affiliate deals, media rights, sponsorships, everything was hunky-dory. But over the last year or so, we've obviously seen a significant amount of scandals take place where games have been fixed, games have been rigged, prop bet, markets are getting suspiciously bet into, and now you're starting to see Congress get involved. There was a memo that was written. Ted Cruz and Marina Cantwell wrote a letter from Congress to the Major League Baseball office and demanded answers. They wanted to know why, for multiple years, we had gamblers rigging and players rigging prop bet markets, right? We're talking about the Emmanuel Clase, Luis Ortiz, first pitch of an inning, baller strike over under 94.5 miles an hour prop bets that were being rigged by those relief pitchers. That indictment, which came out about a week ago, stated that $450,000 was made over the course of 2 years by these illegal gambling activities. And Ted Cruz wants answers. And I understand why he wants answers. I want answers too. It's a very unique story. It's different than the NBA story, which I think was more mafia-based. This story is a little more insider trading based, where I think a couple of bad actors either sunk their claws into Emmanuel Clase or got something on him. I don't know what. Because the fact that he was, making millions of dollars per year and taking a $5,000 bribe to rig these pitches just doesn't make sense. So they had to have something on him. But they operated for several years by kind of flying under the radar. Again, they made $450,000 in 2 years. I know that's a lot of money, but over the course of 2 years, it's small bites here, small bites there, and you just slowly build a bankroll over time, rigging these smaller prop bets. But eventually, the operation expanded, and they bit off more than they could chew, and they got a little greedy, and that's when they got caught. So to answer Ted Cruz and Marina Cantwell's question, how did they not notice Emmanuel Clase or Luis Ortiz doing this for now, 2 years? Well, the answer is they kept a very low profile and they flew under the radar for just long enough. And then when the operation expanded, that's when they got caught. So I would argue the system continues to work properly here. And it's really hard to catch the smaller criminals doing low-level things. Eventually, those criminals are going to make a mistake. They're going to get greedy, and then they're going to get caught. Now, it took a little bit longer than maybe some people would have liked, but eventually they got caught. So I think the moral of this story is the prop betting regulations are about to get much stiffer in America. We're going to see a cap on how much you can risk on props. We're likely going to see a cap on what props are being offered. We saw the NFL send a memo about, hey, we don't want this prop offered. We don't want this prop offered. Now, a lot of those props were offshore props that aren't really, legal in this country anyways. And they were very much, first, mover type of props, like the first team to do this, the first player to do that. Those are not very popular props in America. The most popular props are who's going to score a touchdown, how many yards. Like, I think those props are fine. Very hard to rig those props, especially the star players. But I do think we are about to see a changing of the guard in this country on how we feel about gambling. I think the sentiment, the narrative on gambling is about to change. I think we're going to see a lot of congressional pushback. I think we're going to see a lot of oversight. We're going to see a lot of regulation. And I think gambling will be fine in the long run because just like booze in this country, every time someone gets a DUI, we're not going to talk about canceling booze. But I do think there is going to be a strong push to cancel gambling because of all of these scandals. Now, you have my word, as long as there is breath in my lungs and these national networks give me a platform to come on their show and speak out, I am going to speak for the gambler, and I'm going to say that bad actors are going to do bad actor things regardless. And if you cancel gambling, all you're doing is pushing the bad actors to the offshore unregulated markets. And the answer is to continue the push for regulation of gambling in this country at a higher level. And maybe it's to lower the limits on props and to change the offerings. But getting rid of props, canceling props is not the right answer. And I do think, though, there is going to be a strong referendum against gambling in this country over the next year. And I'm frankly excited because I think I'm going to get a chance to keep going on ABC and hopefully CNN and raise my national platform because let's be honest, your boy's got to eat and I love talking. But I do think we are about to see a significant shift in the winds of gambling in this country. You're seeing commercials all the time. You're seeing all of these markets being offered all over the place. And I do think we have overindulged. And I think the next wave of gambling regulation in this country is going to be to tighten the screws and to try to weed out some of these bad actors. Because it's a bad look when you have pitchers rigging individual pitches, when you have NBA players leaking information about how they're going, how many minutes they're going to play and who's going to play. You're seeing the NBA ask for cell phone records for text messages with the Lakers and LeBron. I mean, again, I think the temperature of anger, the temperature of the public sentiment against gambling is rising in this country. Based off of what I am experiencing, I'm seeing it on the national media side. They don't understand it. And what you don't understand, you're going to attack. And I think I hopefully will be a voice of reason for this. And I'm excited to get an opportunity to speak on some of these national platforms because I think the message that I'm delivering has landed well so far. But I think there is a big misunderstanding on gambling and the national media. And these scandals are kind of showing us that. It's going to be a fascinating year or so as we push forward with prediction markets and more props and the regulation of those props and how everything comes into focus. But keep an eye on this, guys. The gambling vibes in America were really strong over the last couple years, especially 2019, 2020. After the pandemic, people just wanted to get out there and bet. 2021, 2022. But over the last year or so, I've noticed the wave receding. And I think it's going to be very interesting to watch, especially if Congress gets involved and if there's regulation at the federal level. It is going to make things very interesting for a lot of these major sports books going forward. So that's Rise and Wine this week. The national media starting to crack down on gambling, and the sentiment against gambling in this country is starting to become an interesting story. All right, let's finish the show as we always do with Morning Glory, an actionable element Monday Night Football. It is the Las Vegas Raiders hosting the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys getting back some pretty nice pieces on defense, and I think that's kind of the reason why we've seen this number leak out to 3.5. In general, I kind of like the Raiders as a home dog, but I don't trust either of these teams, frankly. I don't trust laying points with that Cowboys defense, even though they are getting back some healthy pieces. And I do not trust the Raiders with their crappy offense, figuring out a way to keep Dallas, especially defensively, off the board. Even the Raiders defense hasn't played well this year. So Cowboys defense 31st in EPA per play, 30th in explosive play rate this year. It's been really bad. Raiders defense does a better job at limiting explosives. And that's where I think they have a chance for Dak Prescott to compete. Geno Smith has been so bad this year, guys. But my best bet for this game is in the prop market. I think sides and totals are a really tough bet in the NFL every week, guys. I really do. The prop market, we're going to go Brock Bowers. I got over 70.5 receiving yards this week. I'm seeing 72.5. Goodness gracious, Jared, speak. 72.5 is the best number I see available right now as we record this video on late Sunday night. I will go over 72.5 receiving yards for Brock Bowers. I'll give you out a number that exists right now in the market. I see some 73.5s out there. Circa's up to 77.5. So again, Circa's usually pretty sharp. I think this number will continue to rise up into the high 70s as we get closer to game time on Monday night. But I think Brock Bowers is unguardable, and I think this Raiders offense is going to be in a negative game script against the Cowboys, and I think Geno Smith is going to be chucking it all over the yard. And I think Brock Bowers is going to have a big game on national TV against the Cowboys. Give me Bowers over 72.5. Morning glory for episode 8 of The Morning After. I appreciate the time in listening and consuming the show. Don't forget, subscribe to the newsletter. It will go out shortly after I get finished recording. The newsletter is free. It wraps up everything in the podcast. If you don't have time to listen to an hour-long podcast, I get it. Listen as you can, but subscribe to the newsletter. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow all the socials. Keep supporting the podcast, guys. I'm going to keep doing this thing every week. I'm thinking about adding another newsletter at some point later in the week, which is going to include my football picks. I might do that during the playoffs. I don't know. The newsletter hopefully is going to turn into its own separate entity, but right now it's just kind of mirroring the podcast. But the Morning After brand is growing, and I'm very excited to keep sharing the content with you because I love what I do every week. I am blessed to do this every week, and I appreciate all of the support as I continue to build The Morning After into a behemoth. But that's it for this episode. We will catch you next week. Good luck with all your plays, and enjoy the week.